mentioned before about, you guys do Narcan training, and so we don't want to get too much into this, but there's some nonsense that you see on the internet. People talk about, Narcan, and people having like what's called Lazarus parties, where people supposedly shoot heroin, and then they shoot too much, and someone gives them a Narcan shot and brings them back to life. That's all bullshit. That does not exist at all whatsoever. Has anyone ever had Narcan pushed into their system before? Oh yeah, that's very, very humbling, yeah. So trust me, there are no Narcan parties where you go around doing that, unless you're really into masochism or you're a sadist. So I've overdosed 24 different times to the hospital. That's 24 hospital overdoses where I was dragged there, And 12 of those I was brought back by Narcan. So you can imagine every overdose is PTSD, every overdose is trauma. But back in my era, it wasn't about, carrying loving nurses. Detroit Receiving Hospital got kind of sick of me. So after they gave me my Narcan shot, they stripped me down naked, 4-point restraints, and the nurse looks at me, she goes, "We're going to wheel you out with your catheter in you into the middle of the hallway so you can sit by yourself and reflect upon your bad decision making." I'm like, no, damn, it's like that in here? In the hallway for 3 hours? Like, hi, how you doing? How's it going? Yeah, drugs are bad, don't take drugs. See what happens when you use drugs? Like, wow, talk about scared shit for other people. That wasn't very nice, right? And what happened? Did I leave there and go to rehab? I was so angry. I felt so insulted. I go, "That's how you treat people?" I felt like more of a piece of shit. Wanted to use more drugs, make that pain go away. I was so embarrassed. So, even in the healthcare system, you'll see that. There's a stigma in treating people that are IV drug users that we still deal with. We're fighting stigma really hard. It's gotten so much better. But trust me, in the old days, people that were using IV drugs were considered less than human, and they were treated as such, trust me, in a hospital setting. And things have gotten better because, like I said before, 80% of people that have drug problems now oftentimes come from good families, just had a pill addiction, a bad doctor kind of ruined them. But back in my era, we were the baddest of the bad. So going through withdrawals was horrible. We discussed that at Brighton Hospital. The shortest intervention ever, we discussed that as well. I want to kind of touch on addiction. Everybody in this room knows addiction is a disease, right? Okay, so we're going to ask the big question, why is it a disease? Why? Well, it's got symptoms and it's treatable, right? The AMA defines anything to be a disease if it's symptoms and it's treatable, right? So if a person has the flu, what are some of the symptoms of the flu? Like coughing, runny nose, congestion. I got a little bit of a chest cold right now, right? And so you can see this person actually has these symptoms. They have an illness, right? So what about addiction? Are there signs of addiction, symptoms that you can look at, like physical ones? Imagine if a guy's homeless and he's got an alcohol or drug problem. Does he look so good? Does he smell so good? Does he dress so good? Probably not, right? But there's also a status for addiction. A person can look really good and be a full-blown addict, right? We know that as well. But as the disease kind of progresses, we can see that change in how they appear. It's kind of ruthless like that, right? So, addiction's got physical symptoms. What about mental symptoms of addiction? If a person has a drug addiction, what kind of mental problems do they often have? How about anxiety? How about PTSD? A lot of my work now is about dealing with PTSD. That's never the plan. Most of the women that come to see me that have heroin addictions have had really bad things happen to them. Use your imagination. And I have clients that are the victims of sexual trafficking at that little shithole hotel down in Detroit. You might have heard about the Victory Inn. And I got to hear those stories. And trust me, I'm a pretty tough guy. When I hear those stories for an hour, I got to go to the gym for 3 hours and blast music through my head so I don't have those stories, sticking into my mind. I got to go through a lot of tissues and a lot of pain. That never had to happen. So the lifestyle, the drugs, there's so much that goes to it, and it can be so heartbreaking and so heart-wrenching. And more PTSD means more emotional pain, which means more painkillers are needed, right? And that vicious cycle begins to kick in. And so even with me, the PTSD that I have, at one point, I was starting some trouble because I had a big mouth back then when I was using, and these guys realized they couldn't actually get to me one-on-one, so they brought a gun to a fist fight, and I wasn't prepared. And so instead of shooting me, they missed and hit my girlfriend with a 12 gauge. That was a really bad day. She survived. That was a really bad day. If you guys know about the men's in the 12-step program, right? There's a thing called a 8-step or 9-step, right? Making amends. And so, one of the hardest amends ever to make When I called her mom to tell her about her daughter, mom answers the phone and she says, "What the hell did you do this time?" It's like, wow. Your daughter's in the hospital. What did you do this time, Raj? What did you do this time, Raj? I didn't, this guy, he shot at, my daughter's in the hospital because she got shot. Was she with you when it happened? Yes, she was with me. I want to kill you, Raj. Back when I was in Children's Village and I got out, right, they released me. I want to date some girl. Hi, how you doing? You're the juvie kid, right? You can't see my daughter, right? I had the whole neighborhood, every mom hated me, right? Isn't that crazy? And you fast forward, after I got sober, I got 12 years sobriety, 12 years continuous, uninterrupted sobriety. And I swear to God, I can bring you 100 moms that love me now, but it wasn't like that before. People can change. I swear to God, it's true. I swear to God, it's true. Change is actually normal. We can do this. So the reason why I bring these stories up, so you can say, okay, he did all that stuff, and he's at this point in his life today, so anybody can get sober. Anything is possible. That's the hope I'm trying to inspire. I want to break stigma and inspire hope. Anybody can get sober. Never ever count anybody out. You know, back during my era of therapy and getting help, it wasn't like it is today, where they have this attitude of how can we help you? You have a disease. It was, I go see this therapist guy, some hard ass. He looks at me, he goes, "You're a junkie and you're going to die. You know that, right?" I'm like, "This is how therapy begins?" He goes, "Yeah, by the way," he goes, "I can tell you're lying because your lips are moving." I'm like, "Bet." Like, wow, we're on that shit? He goes, "Yep." He goes, "You got no hope." They say only about 5% of you guys ever get sober. I'm like, 5%, huh? Real number, 5%. So how did therapy work out for me, by the way? Did I go back? Amazing. You know, Hazelton began doing what's called the hot seat. I'm going to show you how therapy has changed over time. So in the early 80s, they had this idea that people that were addicts need to have their heads hammered if they have a problem and all their ideas are stupid. So they put you in a group setting with 12 people around you, and they put you in the middle of the group, right? And each person goes around and says something about you that's wrong. For example, you're a really bad mother. You really make bad choices. You have a shitty career. You're never going to be wealthy. You're never going to get an education. And the entire circle goes around. And all kinds of people basically crying and sobbing, right? And then the therapist would go, "Okay, is your denial gone now?" Imagine that. Real form of therapy, right? And so what happened as they began studying this kind of therapy? What did it do to people? They would refuse to go back. They would actually ruin their lives, overdose, get all kinds of trouble. They would say, "I don't care about going to jail or prison. I'll never go back to that place where I sat in the middle of that group and got humiliated," right? And you fast forward in the early 90s, they began thinking, you know what? That's a really stupid way to help somebody. Because if a person that's using drugs and alcohol has low self-esteem and low self-confidence, wow, how about we make them feel better about themselves and then we'll see what happens. So they go to this rehab center in Hazleton, same place. They call it the affirmation circle. So I sit in the middle of the circle and everyone goes around and says 3 positive things about you. 3 positive things. Imagine you sit in a circle, they go, "You're going to be a good mother. You're really smart. Hey, you're really good at sports." And 3 things from each person, and when the circle is done, how's that person feel? Better. See, self-esteem doesn't solve addiction. Okay, I wish it could. I guess everybody high self-esteem and all of a sudden stop using drugs. But trust me on this. When you feel good about yourself, when you have higher self-esteem and higher self-confidence, it makes it that much more difficult to put poison into your body. Is that making sense? So the goal is to increase your self-esteem and hang out with positrons. In this world that we live in, there's 3 kinds of people. We got positrons that will help us reach our full potential and be happy and successful. We'll make more money. We'll be more happy. It's called betterment, right? Also, we have neutrons. You hang out with a neutron, it's not going to affect your life either way. No more money, no less money. No more happy, no less happy. But the negatrons. If you marry, date, or hang out with negatrons, they will actively sabotage you and stop you from reaching your full potential. Is that making sense? So we have no time for negatrons in our lives. Lives are too short for negatrons. Is that fair? So we talk about this disease concept. I want to kind of finish it up. We got physical, mental, spiritual. We got even financial disease symptoms. And we even have what's called spiritual symptoms for addiction as well. So if a person has a drug or alcohol problem, we can see it damaging them physically, harming them mentally, affecting their finances as well. And also we have what's called legal consequences. So if a person has a drug problem, How come the police are so interested in them? Why does this person with a drug problem draw police contact all the time? What is it about that? The police seem very interested in people using drugs. Because what? Drugs are illegal. Is that true? Right. So if you have a drug problem, can you kind of tell everybody, I love shooting heroin, I'm going to go out and shoot some heroin today? Can you broadcast that around? Not really. So we live in this secret drug world when we're in active addiction, right? All about secrets. What if our family was all about secrets? No. Addiction 101. If you want to create an addict, the best family, don't trust, don't tell, don't feel, right? And constantly we're going to invalidate you. And so you do that over years and years, all of a sudden you send them off to college or high school, what happens to those people? They're very vulnerable to addiction. Is it making sense? So we live in this secret world. And so we talk about the police and we talk about, police contact, all this kind of stuff. And so I've seen the system do more damage to people than the drugs do, especially with marijuana. I've seen the people that got caught using marijuana had more damage to their futures, their education, getting student loans, than the actual marijuana has done to them. Is that interesting? So addiction is the only disease whose symptoms are basically criminal, right? You have this disease and you are now a criminal, right? You can be schizophrenic, that's not criminalized. You can be depressed, that's not criminalized. So how is it for a person with a mental illness that's been criminalized when they're walking around trying to be normal? Is that easy? Is it making sense? But when we talk about criminality, it's very important. They did a study on criminals, right? They said, we want to figure out if they're really criminals or not. I always enjoy having people come to my office and they have DUIs or MIPs or they have heroin possession charges. They say, I want to figure out if you're a criminal or not. I got to ask you a few questions. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Okay, if you're not using drugs or alcohol, what are the odds of you being arrested? And they're like 0. Oh, this is great news. You're not a criminal. If you were a criminal, which you're not, you say, even when I'm not drunk or high, I'll break your nose and steal your shit. I'm like, wow, okay, you're a criminal. So they did a study on people that used heroin, IV heroin addicts, right? The lowest of the low. See what happens if they stop using heroin. So they watched them for an entire year, self-reports and police reports. Guess what happens when people stop using heroin for 1 year with their criminality? 80% commit 0 crime. Wow. So only 20% of people that actually use heroin are really criminals. That's important to understand that, isn't it? 80%. So most communities don't like crime. Is that true? So if you get people off of drugs, what happens to your crime rate? It goes down. Amazing. So how come they don't focus on getting people off of drugs? How come they always focus on making these big busts? We had $1 billion methamphetamine bust, or cocaine bust in California. So $1 billion worth of meth was taken, actually meth, right? So if you find $1 billion load of methamphetamine, shouldn't the price of meth go up on the streets? Right? Shouldn't it? But it didn't. El Chapo is now in prison. You guys know that. El Chapo's been sentenced. He will never get out of prison. And I hate him. He's the fentanyl king. If one of your friends or people in your family died from a fentanyl overdose, you can blame it on El Chapo. Almost all the fentanyl came from him and the Sinaloa drug cartel. So he's going to be in federal prison for the rest of his life. And so now that El Chapo is in prison, right, and if that really worked to damage the Sinaloa drug cartel, shouldn't the prices of cocaine and heroin, methamphetamine go up, right? And what's happened? Nothing. And even the DEA admits that his son and his brother have taken over the organization. Is it amazing? Without a heartbeat, not even a skipped heartbeat at all. So Sinaloa drug cartel is doing really good and bringing drugs in a very timely manner and very cheap for American consumers, right? You can't stop it on the supply side. You got to stop it on the demand side. Is that helpful? So the main symptom of addiction is the inability to get high successfully. That's not a challenge. When addicts use drugs and alcohol, they get bad consequences. They get crying moms. They get police contact. They get failing livers. End up in hospitals. And so we talk about these symptoms being very serious. And so obviously, with regards to people getting sober, if you were trying to help someone get off of drugs and alcohol, what would you guys do in this room? What's the first step? I mean, I love FAN, don't get me wrong, because FAN really helps lots of people, but what's another step besides FAN to help somebody get off of drugs? You love somebody, right? And they got a drug problem. They look at you and they're crying. I want to get off the heroin. How do you help them? Inpatient, right? Anything else? 12-step meetings? Therapist? Pray? Church? right? So, back to the thing about interventions. Anybody ever see a TV program, Intervention? Okay, so they begin analyzing the outcomes, long-term outcomes, people that went on this TV show, right? 80% stay sober for 1 year. Is that good? 80% stay sober for 1 year. Why is that? So if you want to help someone get off of drugs and alcohol, the recipe is really easy, but it's kind of expensive. Everyone that goes on this TV show gets guaranteed 30 days of inpatient rehab. Guaranteed 30 days. And if you have your insurance, you go to Maple Grove or Brighton Hospital where I used to work, and the insurance pays for usually how many days? 14. Now maybe 7 at Maple Grove, right? So parents will say to me, Raj, rehab doesn't work. I go, why is that? My son went to Maple Grove for 7 days and he came out and he used drugs. Like, no. Imagine you had got cancer, right? Here comes your chemotherapy. I want to give you 7 chemotherapy sessions. Well, why is that? It's all your insurance pays for. Well, doc, how many do I need? Well, you need 30. Well, I want 30. You can't have that. Is that crazy? Think about that. So people come out of rehab, they say it doesn't work, but that's not true. You got to have 30 days in rehab to actually say it doesn't work. So this TV show gives everybody that 30 days inpatient. Then after that, you get 6 months of sober living paid for as well. Think about that. So you get 30 days inpatient, you get 6 months of sober living, and you get free therapy during the entire year. It gets even better. The moms and dads get free therapy too. Is that crazy? Imagine that. Moms and dads get therapy, the kid gets therapy, you get 30 days in rehab, you got 6 months of sober living. What happens to that person? Is that effective? Right? But it's costly, right? It costs a lot of money. Is that amazing? It does work. 80% of the time for 1 year sober. But it's hard. People tell you that doesn't work. You got to be clever about that. No. I've been to rehab many times. I walked in, I don't know how many rehab doors, maybe stay for 24 hours, 7 days, 3 days, 5 days. The last time around, I was only there for 7 days, but I had enough. Been a sober living before. All these things make a difference. So when you get somebody sober, it involves push and pull factors, right? You got to get somebody to feel like using drugs is going to be hard for them, and being sober is a positive thing. I tell moms and dads, your job is to make your kids using as miserable as possible, and they're staying sober as easy as possible. And I'm going to tell you, we get kind of ruthless when it comes to heroin, because you come in my office and you're shooting heroin, you've overdosed before. I'm not going to be really nice and say, well, you got to go to rehab today. If you don't do that, we're just going to yell at you. So in regards to ultimatums, we've done things to, when I do an intervention in my office and the moms read their letters, that's my home run hitter, about 80% of the time the person will say, I'm going to go to rehab. But 20% say, I'm not going to go. And that's when the ultimatums come out. That's when you say, we're going to call your boss and say that you're on heroin. Right? We're going to actually, call, this is what I say, I'm going to call the dope man and tell him that you got busted and you're a snitch. Because you wouldn't do that. Well, test me. Let's find out. I got one guy really pissed off. Went to rehab though. Son at Brighton Hospital 7 days later, he hugged me and goes, you saved my life, man. You really gonna call my dope man? I go, I didn't have his number. Didn't. Because good play, man. Good poker play, right? Call the bluff and there you go. You gotta play to win. It's not easy. But the job for parents, there's this myth that, when someone's using drugs or alcohol, you wipe your hands of them, say go off on the streets, we're gonna kick you out of the house. It doesn't solve anything. Saying you can't stay here, we're going to go to rehab tomorrow is a solution, but throwing somebody on the streets doesn't help anybody out at all. In fact, that's how you get someone to die. You got to give people hope. You can't fight addiction without hope and love. As silly as it sounds, but it's true. You can't, fight it with hate. You can hate addiction, but the person that's using, you got to love that person, hate their disease. If that makes any sense. I tell moms all the time, you got to love the person that you know. Because deep down, it's almost like a demon possession, right? You see somebody being taken away. Their face changes, their attitude changes, almost like a demonic possession. But in your heart, I know that guy's in there. I know I got to reach out to him. I got to find him deep inside there. So when we deal with people that are using drugs and alcohol, they're going to exhibit what's called denial. They're going to say, I don't have a problem. If I say to you guys, I got a gambling problem, you guys will probably say to me, well, get help and stop gambling. Makes sense, right? If I say to you guys, I got a drug problem, you say to me, well, you got to stop using drugs and get help. If I don't want to stop using drugs, I must never, ever have a drug problem. I need to have a PTSD problem. I need to have a bad parents problem. You'd have a bad wife problem. You have any other problem but drugs. Because if I have a drug problem, now I got to stop taking drugs. That's uncomfortable. That ties back to now. The other thing it's talking about, is distraction. Well, dad smokes marijuana. Okay, that's true, but we're not talking about dad today. My mom used to hit me in the head with a spoon. Okay, that's not good, but you know what? You got a heroin problem right now. All kinds of distractions, pretty clever, right? Also, when a person, you try to help them out, they'll divide the family up and get dad to say, well, he doesn't need inpatient treatment. Mom says he does. Mom wants him to go to inpatient, and the sister says, you know what? He just needs to find a good NA meeting. And everyone is all divided up. They fight amongst themselves, right? And what happens to the addict? They dip out, right, and go back to using again, right? So we have denial as a defense mechanism. We have divide the family up. We also have distraction. And the final one we have is called delay. So do an intervention on somebody, and the guy says, yeah, I'm going to go to rehab. I got to break up with my girlfriend. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I can't go to rehab yet. I have to go see my girlfriend and break up with her. Oh, can't you do that on Facebook by just changing your setting with the status? It's pretty easy, right? No, man, I'm not like that, man. I said, no, we're going to be okay on this one. We're going to call your girlfriend on the phone right now and break up with her. It's called, delay. He doesn't want to go to rehab yet, right? And so the one is that I got to feed my goldfish. I have some beautiful plants that might die, right? I got the dog. And you see this all the time. All this delaying. And sadly, we see people actually delay getting help to the point where they actually die. When they talk about that, when we're dealing with narcotics and opioids, the death rates are really, really high. And it's really unfortunate. Never had to be that way. Big Pharma played a really big role in that, and so did the people that were pushing all the fentanyl. What causes addiction ties back into adverse childhood experiences. I mentioned to you guys before about the dysfunctional family. Don't trust, don't tell, don't feel, and invalidate. But part of dysfunctional family, if you want to create a person that's going to be prone to addiction, is by having really bad things happen to them as a kid. Watching mom get beat up by an alcoholic father, not having a steady place to live, not always having food, not always having clean clothes, a parent that goes to jail off and on. All these things called adverse childhood experiences, called ACEs, will lower your odds of success in life. Isn't that crazy? If you want to prevent addiction, you want to prevent child abuse. You really do. And so you want to help someone who is an addict, always get them inpatient when it comes to narcotics. Push and pull factors play a major role in a person's addiction and recovery. I basically began with consequences. I couldn't stand the way I felt. I kept staying sober later on because of the rewards. I felt better about myself, got my education. And finally, right now, at 12 years sober, why do I do it? It's because it's part of my value system. The same reason why I wouldn't harm a puppy, because it's wrong. How come I don't get high? Because it's wrong. It's wrong for me. When a person has, being sober as part of their value system, it's impossible to get someone to break their values, if it makes any sense. Because there is no classroom required to teach somebody right from wrong. You should know in your heart that harming a puppy is a wrong thing to do. It shouldn't require a class for that, right? What's amazing when it comes to addiction, we want to play this game. Well, you know what? It's going to be different next time. Addiction is a liar and a taker. It makes all kinds of promises and never delivers. And recovery delivers the promises. Addiction promises you more friends, more money, less stress, less anxiety. And it lies right to our faces. And then recovery shows up and goes, what do you want? You say, I want no more police contact. We'll give you that. What else do you want? I want my mom to be more happy. We'll give you that. What else do you want? Well, I kind of want to have a nice car. We'll give you that. Recovery and God are givers. And recovery and God go together. It's called good early direction. Is it making sense? So when you want to fight addiction, you want to use every tool in your arsenal. You want to use spiritual tools. You want to use psychological tools. And this disease model of addiction. Addiction is a disease because it's got symptoms and it's treatable. And the main symptom of addiction is the inability to get high successfully. Is it helpful, guys? Okay, so I got 2 videos I want to play for you guys if you don't mind. Ties into my t-shirt. We got a song called Fortune Favors the Bold that I wrote. My friend Greg Spiker is actually singing the song. He's a very talented musician. Hope you guys enjoy the video. And then after that, we're going to do another one called Addiction is So Powerful. It talks about the power of addiction and how it damages families and damages, the tendencies to want to, take care of a child and also take care of yourself. So he's going to put the video on. And then when we're done doing that, we'll also have any questions towards the end. Please ask some questions. I got 2 more books to give away for free. Yes?